This is just a simple request by one of my neighbors. She has this Sony AM/FM tape player and had some problems with it. She tried to fix it and couldn't get anywhere with it, so I told her I'd take a look at it. I hope to sort of go through this. I don't think it's going to be a very long repair video, really, but you never know. I haven't taken it apart yet, so we can both see together what the real issue is. Customer complaint. The radio works perfectly fine on AC power, but doesn't work on batteries. The initial complaint was that she couldn't get the batteries to work. The customer made the assumption that the batteries were dead, and they got a replacement set, put them in, and it still didn't work. So let's talk a little bit about diagnosis, customer, and dealing with the customer's story, which is the first part of the diagnosis effort when you get one of these things in for repair. So the customer comes in and says, I've tried to replace the batteries and they still doesn't work. There's something wrong with these batteries. So, you Q&A, you question the customer, and eventually you come down to the story where, well, it works on AC, but it didn't work on batteries, so they replaced the batteries on the assumption that they're faulty. So one of the first things you would check is to make sure that the batteries are in fact good. One would assume that when you get a new set of batteries, they should be okay. If the complaint then is that they replace the batteries, it still doesn't work, then a likely cause of the problem is that there's something wrong with the radio on the battery powered circuit side. So the first thing to check is to verify the customer's story. So we can quickly plug it in on the AC. Try the FM. Seems to work fine. AM works fine. I'm going to assume that the tape player works fine, and it seems to be working. We take the AC off, try the same thing.
Hospice Society, BC's best theme park called
FM's now working.
Park is now.
That's interesting. So I tried this earlier in the day. The FM didn't work, and I plugged this in and then unplugged it again, and now all of a sudden FM starts working again. It's on the battery. What's going on? So in these units, the AC system operates or switches over between AC and battery by using a built-in switch on the AC plug. So the way you want to run these on batteries is you actually have to physically disconnect the AC plug here from the system. And what this does is there's a little switch in here that turns off or closes the circuit to the batteries, or opens the circuit to the batteries rather, when it's inserted. And when the plug is removed, there's a switch in here that releases, and then the batteries are then in the circuit. So that's one cause of the problem. And we can see that if I close in on the switch here, see if we can get a view of it. Move the light. Here we go. I'm going to push on the switch here. That's this switch here. As you can see, it's moving. I don't know if you can see it's moving. There we go. So when the AC plug goes in, that switch moves to that position, turns off the batteries. So a likely cause of the problem in this case is that this switch is intermittent, or faulty in some way. So we can go in and actually take a look at it and try to clean it and make sure that it will work correctly. As I said, these things are usually a fairly simple issue. You know, if it works on AC and it doesn't work on DC, well, we know there's nothing wrong with the radio or the tape system or the power supply for the AC. So it's going to be a simple issue in these cases. I'm going to assume that it's going to come out like this. So I have to probably pop the volume control knob off carefully. Switch should just pop right off, and it does. Not quite sure what the antenna is going to do, so take a look at that when we come to it. This is non-trivial. Let's see if I'm missing might be one more screw in the back here. And there is. Which will explain why it's not coming apart. This thing's probably never been taken apart, so it's fighting all the way. Okay, here we go. There we go. And we're in. As a certain Aussie would say, we're in like Flynn. Let's disconnect the speaker. Maybe. I don't know. We'll leave it on for now. It should be okay. Right. So there's our power circuit. Unfortunately, our power switch is buried way back there. So we're going to have a bit of a problem getting to it. It's a little manky, but not too bad. So what are we looking at in terms of getting this apart any further? I think we're going to have to take these screws out, that screw to get the cassette mechanism off, and then we can get at the power supply board. So that's that. Two more connectors here. And the cassette head right here, which you can't see, but it's right on the main board. Carefully remove that, and one more, of course. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Okay. So there's our cassette mechanism. We'll put that to the side. Now we can get to the power board. And that should just slide right out. There we go. Now, for some unexplicable reason, I put connectors on everything except the power supply going to the power jack. Yay for Sony. Thanks, Sony. It is a sealed unit, so it's going to be a little bit difficult if we have to actually go in and do any detail work on it, but it does look like it does disassemble. So if we're lucky, we don't break any of these hinge pins, might be able to get the front face off. Be really careful here not to break these tabs off, because that's then going to be bringing out Mr. Super Glue. Yeah. There, got it. It's like a bit like picking a lock. Now, the question is that going to pop off, or is that part of the circuit? It's ready to go. It's not doing anything. So, I'm thinking I'm going to have to probably pull it off, which is too bad. I'm going to let the desoldering gun heat up, and I'll be back when it's ready to go. Okay, the desoldering gun is ready to go. This should be pretty easy to desolder because there's no plated through holes or anything. It's just a very simple one-sided printed circuit board on phenolic. It's not even fiberglass. Don't need that. And because there's no plated through holes, I'm not too worried about pulling a plated through hole out when I do that. So I can be a little bit more careless, as it were, when I'm prying on it. So we're now at the meat of the matter, this little thing right here. So let's see what's inside and see if we can make it work better. It's a rocker assembly. Now it looks like it, when the switch goes in, it pushes down and just shorts these terminals together here. Doesn't look like it's going to be very easy to put back together again, however. It does show a little bit of wear, so we can hit it with some circuit contact cleaner and see if we can get that cleaned up a little bit better. Now we have the dubious fun of trying to get this thing back together again. There we go. So there's the switch mechanism. See if I can put some light on the matter and take a closer look at how it works. Let's see if we're in focus here. It's all black, so not a lot of contrast here. But anyway, you can see that it's normally closed, which makes sense because the battery has to be powering the circuit when the plug is removed. When the plug is inserted, this rotates and those pins become disconnected. Right at that point, there's a piece of missing metal that this bottom pin is no longer connecting this bus bar and no longer has a circuit up to the upper pin. So that's the point there when it's disconnected. At all other times, the two outer pins are connected. The inner one doesn't seem to have a circuit, or rather it does. When it's fully inserted, the center pin is connected to the upper pin. So it's this is essentially a single pole double throw switch. Very clever little design. Now the question is, can I put it back together again? Let's find out. And we can. Well, that's pretty easy. So the switch is still operational. Looks fine. Let's test the circuit. So we know that when the power plug is removed, the switch is in its resting position, its normal position, that the two outer pins should be connected and the upper and the middle pin should be not connected. So this should be a circuit, and it is, and the upper and the middle is not connected. So we insert the power cord, and here's a tip, boys and girls. When you insert the power cord, make sure it's not actually connected to the AC. Let's do a double check on this before I actually electrocute myself. Okay, we're good. Take two. So what happened there was instinct. My gut instinct told me to stop what I was doing and check. Because if I had plugged this in the wall outlet, one of these would have been hot, and it would have hurt at minimum. So anyway, back to the problem. Now the outer two should be disconnected, and they are, and the middle one and the upper one should have contact, and they do. Okay, so it should be a little bit more reliable now. Run it through a couple of insertion extractions. Just make sure that the contact cleaner gets a chance to clean that center barrel. And now we can just throw it back together. Intermittent because of the gunk on the pins. Okay, so let's get this thing back together. Electrical safety. It's not something to be sneezed at. Ideally, I actually should have this on my isolation transformer. I actually had just plugged it into my bench power supply, thinking that I was just going to use this to check to see if the power was working or not on the radio. And that was not a good idea. Now it's on my isolation. So I can still get a shock if I actually touch both terminals at once. But if I touch the hot now on the isolation transformer, I won't actually get a shock. I'll get a little buzz just from leakage, but I won't get nearly as bad a bang as I would otherwise. All right, we're up to temperature. I think the other problem is that I'm trying to film and think and repair at the same time. And this is something I'm still not used to. It takes a bit of concentration to do all of this. I'm not going from a script or anything, so it's a little bit of a concentration hit. Just check that one final time, make sure it's still okay. Yep, it is. My isolation transformer is off. I plug this in. It's now disconnected. I'm just checking the middle one. We don't use the middle one. It's not hooked up to any circuit. I can also check the AC to make sure the AC is working. I don't think there'll be a problem, but I've got it apart anyway. I might as well take a look at it. There's the meter there. Whoop. This is a challenge of working on a tiny bench. There we go. And we have 120 volts. This should be something around 8 and 16 volts AC. So there we go. Power off. Put the rest of it together. Now this isn't a restoration, this is a repair. So see all this dirt in here? Well, it's going to stay in here. It's not really my responsibility, or the customer's not really paying me to overhaul this thing. They're just trying to get it repaired. So I want to try and spend as little time doing this as possible, save the customer some money. So I'm not really going to spend a lot of time cleaning the insides of it, because likely it'll never be seen again. Now this is just a knob. Oh, it does. I'm just checking to see if it spins infinitely or it actually has a fixed rotation, and it has a fixed rotation. So we have to be a little bit careful about how we put this thing together so that I would say try and find out where the middle spot is, which would be probably the easiest way of doing this. Otherwise, it's going to be a little painful because we're going to have to synchronize it. So let's just see what I can do here. This is all off camera. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to figure out where this thing is going to be on the dial at certain points. And what I can do is I can use a local station to get this thing back in line. Okay, so that should be AM-730, a local station. And I'm got it lined up on the dial now to 730. What I'm going to do now is turn the radio on. Don't really need this right now. Don't need that. I don't need that. I do need the speakers. So I plug in the speakers. Plug in the power, because I don't have the batteries on here. Turn the power on. And go to AM. And tune into AM-730. So that's AM-730. So that tuning dial is in the right position. So we know that's good. That was off camera, but what I took the tape deck mechanism and I lined it up on the outer chassis so that I've got the right radio station, and I made sure not to touch it. So I'd be very careful not to move it now. And now I can put this back on. And when this goes on, it will line up. And hopefully we'll be back in business. We won't have to worry about realigning the radio. Put this back in. There's a little notch there for the wire to go in. So that's all back in. Now, I'm going to review my footage because I know this went somewhere, but I don't remember where. And since I recorded it, well, I can go back and look at it. I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are back and reviewed the video, and I figured out that I made 2 mistakes. What were they? Pause the video and see if you can remember. Trying to chew bubble gum and walk at the same time. Okay, so I may have to realign this again. I don't know. I've worked on different cassettes before, but this is over-optimized in my opinion. This is just absolutely in the focus. This is nonsense. I don't know why they did that. Okay, so beeping is just my silly Chinese meter saying, hey, I'm going to turn myself off now. Okay. This needs to go here to apparently, I guess, hold the power board in from sliding out, which kind of makes sense. And there we go. Mistake number 2, I didn't reconnect the tape head. So it wasn't, the tape's not going to work so good. I'm not going to be able to see this, but I'm just reattaching it in the back here, which is also a bit fiddly and annoying. Thanks, Sony. It's not going to work. My meat hooks are too big to get in there. All right, so little catch for you. This is a recording type tape deck. So there's a switch, a slide switch on the main board here that's used to cut in and cut out the recording mechanism when you're recording onto the tape. So there's a piece of metal here that pushes against the switch when the record system comes on. And so this has to be aligned correctly when you put the whole thing back together again. Yet another fiddly bit that you have to be aware of when you're working on these things. This is the erase lockout. There's a little tab on tape cassettes. When they're broken, this doesn't get pushed, so it's impossible to do a record. But when it gets, if you leave the tab on the tape cassette, or you put a piece of tape over it, it pushes on this lever, and then the record can start. Okay. So I don't have a lot of hope that this thing's still aligned, but you never know. And we'll get that back into alignment there. All this into alignment. And that should be okay. So, 2 bottom screws. This is a lot easier to do when you're actually not having to talk. You didn't see me do this. Another trick I'm going to just sort of show you on this one here that you should be aware of. These are self-tapper plastic screws, and so the hole's already been threaded because the screw's been inserted before. So you want to kind of back off until you feel a click and then screw it in, and that way you don't strip out the hole and cause more issues. Let's see if I can do this without it breaking. Yeah. This one too. Okay, that one is in there. This one's in here. Once again, my meat hooks are too big. Okay, so let's do a sanity check here. That looks like it's going most of the direction, but it doesn't look like it's going all the way. In fact, it actually stops there. So chances are I'm going to have to align it. All right, so let's do this. I'm not going to throw the whole thing together completely, but I need to sort of, luckily I can pull on this and actually move it around, so you know, probably don't see that in the shot. So okay, get some power on this thing. That's me on the light switch button, my elbow. That's not me shorting it out. That was just me resting my elbow on the light switch button. Okay, I'm going to temporarily just put this on here and turn it on. AM.
O'Reilly pins him to the board. West Front Street is still shut down to traffic.
Okay, that's supposed to be AM 730. That is not AM 730. That's roughly where AM 730 should be on the dial. So if we... You don't see what I'm doing here. I'm just manually tuning the capacitor, the tuning capacitor, until I get. So it looks good. I put it back together again. It's a bit high. Okay. That's pretty good. I'll try some FM stations. So should be one. 4.7 and one on 4.9. Look like they're pretty close.
Your gift is able to work hard.
So I think that's pretty good. You're not going to get a very precise reading on this thing. It's loose as it's really very vague in terms of its precision. It's not really going to give you a very good accurate. It's going to get you in the ballpark is what I'm trying to say, I guess. Okay, so everything looks good here. I don't think that has to be hooked up, but I think it was actually stuck in the top here. I'm going to stick it back in there and confirm the switch looks like it's going to work. Yeah, the switch works. So it looks like it's all good. Button it up. Put a couple of screws into it, and the reason for that is because we want to sort of double check that this power switch is working again. I don't want to get too far into putting this thing together and then have to tear the whole thing apart again when I find out that it's not working. So I get that one in there. I'll get the batteries in. And I can close the compartment door because that's the only one. That's the only screw that needs to be in there. Sanity check. Yeah, I got them all in the right way. Okay. Drum roll, please. This thing. Let's get the switch on there. This thing should turn on. And it does.
West connector, east-west connecting to the Queensboro, wide open on 91A. Marine Wayne Stewart's away. All but say okay. Patella Bridge is not. King George Boulevard and McBride doing fine. Very fine, actually.
Do a couple of tests, plugging and unplugging the power cord.
Highway 1 through Coquitlam is great. Highway 1 through Surrey, through Langley. Decent, especially through Surrey. Langley, it's only decent. You're slow from about Bradner Road all the way up to just before 248. Big westbound delays through here. Less westbound delays coming out of
Just to confirm that I do have power.
westbound in front of Whatcom is slow.
There's my power output there.
From after Sumas all the way up to Peterbill's overpass, that's the worst of it. And after that, you are pretty free and clear the rest of the way. Don't forget about Fraser Highway, by the way. Fraser Highway's looking great. Pitt River Bridge is also just
outlet
fine.
there.
Virginia's Bridge may be okay, but you have a paving project out of Maple Ridge.
Yep.
That's low heat at the Amy bypass. Amy one closed off in all four directions.
And we're good.
What's going on? Let me know what's up.
Radio's repaired.
Pound 730. You can always get us on Twitter.
So, what did we learn, or what did we take away from this? I hope that I demonstrated some tips and tricks on doing initial diagnosis. It's always a good idea to know fairly well what's wrong with the thing before you start taking it apart, because then you know what you're going to be looking for. It can be quite frustrating, and it can take a long time, or longer, if you have to sort of take the thing apart to figure out what's going on, and you don't know where to start looking, right? So by, careful examination of the clues, I guess you could say, and looking at what the customer was saying and what our initial test results were showing, we knew from the outset that it was some sort of switch issue between the battery and the AC circuit. So we were able to drill in very quickly and determine that it was actually the AC battery switchover switch that's integrated into the AC plug or socket. So I hope you get something out of this, and it's an enjoyable little 20 minutes or so of video. I mean, this was a very simple repair. There wasn't a lot of things wrong with this thing other than it being a little dirty. Just basically dirty contacts. It probably wasn't used or cycled very often, so the owner didn't really use that option. probably kept it plugged in all the time, and when they wanted to try using the batteries, it didn't work. So that's it. Once again, I hope you you get something out of this, and it shows you a little bit of some techniques on trying to do small radio repairs. And this is kind of the stuff I was doing 20 years ago, back when it was actually a viable business. And it was enjoyable at the time. You know, I kind of missed it a little bit, but times change, and we move on. Anyway, that's it for now. Cheers all, and hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye.